Next up, we've got Greg Wallace, who's the Chief Executive of the Master Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Drain Layers Association. At GasNZ, we've had a really good relationship with Greg and his team at Master Plumbers. I think, we really see them as a key partner for us in helping to, really kind of integrate the thinking between the gas industry and essentially our frontline workers out there in the field, making gas connections in people's homes, doing the important gas fitting work that the plumbing and gas fitting community do. So Greg has more than 30 years experience in the construction sector, and he's also, importantly for this discussion, Greg is the Chief Executive of MasterLink, which is actually the only national mentored apprenticeship program to specialise in plumbing, gas fitting and drain laying. Established by Master Plumbers in 2002, MasterLink now employs more than 300 apprentices in the sector, placing them with nationwide host businesses. So I'm hoping Greg might share a bit of his experience with MasterLink with us. Please join with me in welcoming Greg Wallace.
Kia ora. Thank you, Ben, for that introduction. I'm just going to briefly, hopefully, go through some slides with you. It's a great pleasure, and I just want to acknowledge the work that GasNZ does, and particularly Jeffrey. We've got a strong relationship. We catch up in Wellington for coffees regularly, but it's really, we've talked a lot today about collaboration and better communication with the industry, and that's my factor. I'm a bit staggered that today a couple of the major gas retailers are banning gas connections for retailers, for consumers. But they don't want to communicate that because of the political and the nervousness around that. And that's not good enough, right? And I think there's a real challenge that we've got to hold people to account. We need gas to be vibrant, but we need transition into renewables. And while we're stopping gas connections, it's just not acceptable while we're trying to keep an industry impact. So that's one of my dig. Right, Master Plumbers, and I say Master Plumbers, Gas Fitters, Drain Layers, quite a mouthful, so we just keep Master Plumbers. We represent the gas fitters across New Zealand. And as being touched on, MasterLink was just probably the greatest decision of Master Plumbers history was to create MasterLink. And why we created MasterLink more than 22 years ago was to make sure that we had apprentices from Kaitaia to Bluff, right? Because we had a downturn in the apprentice market. We now turn over $23 million. I have 8 regional managers, and I have an HR team that keeps very busy with our young people across the motu. But we're really proud of our stat that 96% of all apprentices through MasterLink complete their apprenticeship and go on to be a qualified gas fitter, plumber or drain layer across New Zealand. So some stats. So if you didn't know, for the last 8 years, we've been in a construction boom, okay? The number one issue in the last 8 years in our surveys that we do 6 monthly had been the workforce shortage. And it has been to crisis levels. Now we've got net immigration leaving the country in droves. So if you didn't know, I was talking to Ben at Smoko before. On a unionised side in Victoria, a plumbing apprentice, year one, can earn $120,000 a year. And you wonder why we're losing talented people across the ditch. We're at about 60,000 people leaving, and we can track those through MasterLink. So in gas fitters in New Zealand, yep, we're total, so you've got tradespeople and certified, different classes. There's only 2,664 across the whole country. We estimate we're about 38% short of qualified tradespeople. Now everyone in this forum, these gas fitters actually install your product, have consumers saying, if we can't provide that service, it's just a bit ludicrous. The other stat there, if you didn't know, most of our MasterLink apprentices do plumbing, drain laying and gas fitting when they sign up. That's 7 years, or the same as a GP, to get fully qualified. Now, we spoke to Megan Woods when she was Minister of Building and Construction about that. We've spoken to the PG board and the regulators. We think we need to do some real change to make sure we can get what I call, you might not like the term, Glenn, but fast track our apprentices through their qualification, okay? Because Now, just another stat, average age of a gas fitter in New Zealand is 47 years old. So we've got an ageing demographic. Believe it or not, in plumbing, it's worse. It's 55, okay? And then what's happened is I've just got a graph there of the apprentice numbers. Now, I want to congratulate the Labour Party, because Glenn's here. I wouldn't have done this normally. But the Labour government did put the Apprentice Boost scheme in place, which was funding for employers to take on. And it was a great initiative. Problem with it, they went too broad. They should have targeted the industries that really needed that help. And then a couple of years later, they halved the funding, right? So you've got to start something, you've got to give it some longevity to go through. The national government has continued with the boost funding, but at the reduced level, and they've made it more targeted. But you see there, we've dropped down to 2,468 apprentices currently in the market in 2024. That is not sustainable to replace the ageing demographic and the people that are leaving to go to Australia, okay? Now, I'd also tell you from being CEO of Masterlink, the numbers for plumbers, drainlayers and gas fitters apprentices sign-ups, and those sign-ups can happen any time during the year, had dropped through the floor. So the construction industry is in what I call crisis and turmoil, particularly in Auckland and other areas, and we're just not getting the apprentice numbers that we will need as soon as the construction market picks up, okay? So we've had 8 years of a boom, I get that, and that's helped our apprentice numbers. We drop off the cliff, and what does everyone do? Stop employing. At the same time, they're all leaving to go to Australia. So not a great story for that. So if you didn't know, gas hot water for domestic houses makes 39% of the market, okay? So it's a huge part of the market here. So we talk about, a lot of people talk about heat pumps and electrifying New Zealand. Well, the reality is for cold climates, heat pumps for hot water, particularly in Southern Queenstown and Wanaka, they actually just don't function, okay? So that's the reality of it. The second part, if you didn't know, I have a teenage daughter. Trying getting her out of the shower in the morning is near impossible, right? So people are still choosing gas as their preferred option while we move to renewables. And we've got to make sure that market's there. To install a heat pump hot water system, which is around 270 litres of stored water that you may not be using, it's around $10,000, okay? We can install a Renault Infinity and Riemann Techie for about $2,500. The value proposition for consumers is just not there at the moment. We need to keep moving with renewables, but at the same time, we've got to keep the gas fitting market still active. So I just want to touch on a bit of training, which is a bit of my passion. So look, the current situation, and I know the government is going through the Vocation Education Review, and we've gone through decades of pain, including Rove, that was with the previous government. But what we've got is an absolute terrible situation in New Zealand with our facilities for our trainees, what I call a substandard. Poor is an understatement. Commercial gas is not trained well at all, okay? And we've got a low level of tutor training, particularly in the gas sector. We have no training at the moment for gas fitters around hydrogen. Now, you may say that's a bit early, but not when you compare to Australia what they're doing, okay? And we have a lack of innovation. So we have new products coming from our suppliers all the time, but we don't put that in a training environment. There's a lot to work on with that. So look, we have done some work for the workforce development councils, and again, Glenn, they've been a great initiative that Labour government did put in. I'll be very nervous to see them going because of whether it's the regional leadership groups or the workplace development councils, we had a platform where we could make some change. So we did complete a full review of the PGD program, and we identified a real lack of training in some aspects of gas fitting. So this is the coal as we see it. The red is what are compulsory modules, and you work through these modules at a block course at a polytech. The problem with the polytechs at the moment, there's 25 training polytechs across New Zealand. Only 2 of those are financially viable. And so what we do need is consolidation, particularly when it comes to the gas sector. So if you didn't know, we're taking commercial gas out of the apprenticeship, and we're going to make it a micro-credential, and we have no training for hydrogen at the moment, okay? So what we are seeing there is a future opportunity, but we've got to get the training put in place so we can start developing apprentices, remembering it takes 7 years for them to get qualified. If we don't put it in the program now, in 7 years' time, we've got no one who can work on hydrogen, and we're hoping the development is there. If you have a look at the picture on the right here, that's the hydrogen training centre that we went to in Brisbane, and there were also ones in Victoria and building one in Sydney. So for us, what we need is the government to commit to a renewable gas as part of the energy transition, and then develop a pathway for endorsements so gas fitters can use renewable gases, being biogas and hydrogen. But mostly what I believe in is we need to create a centre of excellence for gas training, including hydrogen and biogas, right? So at the moment, 14 training providers for gas, none of them do it well. So what we need is a combined centre. We need some funding, but also we need to attach all the opportunities for the gas sector. So if you have a look here, this is the Victorian PICAC Centre of Excellence. They have every gas going to this training provider, right? They service 7.5 million people out of one training centre, which costs $30 million to build. We are ludicrous in New Zealand trying to do it over 14 facilities. We don't have the funding and we don't have the net population to fund those training centres, and that's why our quality has dropped down to such a low level. That's me. Thanks.